because by then I was, what, about 12 years old, or maybe a little older than that. And so, and then as time was up, because we were just getting an hour for each one, and so as time was up, she said to me, she asked me to ask the soldiers to bring her there, because I have a feeling that I'll never see you again. So I said I'd ask, and then my little sister was hanging on to her, and she says, what about me? So my mother said, well, you'll go to the hospital with Aunt Odessa. And no, she cried, and by that time, all the carrying on, it was time for me to leave. I was close to the gate. So I left, and then Bella hadn't come back yet. It was her turn to go after me. She hadn't come back yet. And I waited for her to come back, hoping that she would have mother and at least my little sister with them. With her, but when she came back, no, she didn't have anybody. And then nighttime, the nightfall came, we started hearing screams, cries and screams, and cattle train. The doors were banging back and forth, and I thought I heard my older sisters crying, and my arm, but I don't know if it was her, but it was in my head that maybe that was her. And we stood by the barbed wires, holding onto the wires. Our hands were bloody for 3 days. This went on 3 days. And one girl had a seizure, and we tried to help her. And then this was every night. We stood at the wires, listening to the screams, and we all cried, caravan of cries. And then we didn't, during the day we had to, the Germans, our soldiers came down with the whips, and they made us go up to the warehouse to work. So as soon as the work was over, it was a 12-hour day, as soon as the work was over, we ran down again, and again we stood holding the barbed wires with our bloody hands. And then on the third day, everything was quiet. It was just like a death came over everything. It was just total, like no sound that came from anywhere. And then the soldiers came down and they said, I will walk you to the, this was before that. Then again, 2 SS, so the Gestapo came to our camp. This was at that time, and they were weeding, they were trying to weed out, and they made us line up. They made an announcement. Whoever was born before, after 1926, needs to step out, and whoever is 39 years or older also has to step out. I didn't know how old I was, because I remember when my mother was talking to her friends on the street, in the cul-de-sac, sitting around talking, and my mother pointed to me and she said, she's the scale. So her friends didn't know what she was talking about, and she said, well, the scale, she was born October 6th. She never said anything about what year that I was born. So my sister stood next to me in line, and she said, you were born 1926. So she was 3 years older than I was. But she saved my life really, because since I didn't know how old I was, and I believed what she said, I was not, because my face would get very red if I would feel that I told a lie, or any little thing, my face would get red. So so then when they kept on walking back and forth, and some people did step out of line, including my friend Lucia, who went to school with me, so she was my age, and she stepped out of of line with her mother and her older sister because they didn't want to part. And so finally they kept on walking back and forth, looking at our faces to see if anybody was lying or anybody is younger or older. And they stopped several times in front of me. How old are you? I was born October 6, 1926. Okay. They walked away, and then the other one came back again. How old are you? I was born October 6, 1926. And so this is how it went, and finally they walked away from me, and they concentrated on the people that walked out of the line. And so, but Lyndon, that soldier, he was the youngest one, he said he was a one-legged man. I don't know how he lost his leg, but he was on crutches. And he was saying to the people, he said, go in your barrack, pack and unpack, pack and unpack. And that's how it was. They were in the barrack, packing and unpacking until the SS left our camp. And that's how he saved their lives. And my friend, she survived with her mother and her two sisters because of Lyndon. And so after that, we stayed in that camp until spring of 1943, and we were shipped out to a place called Vision. So if we were hungry in the first camp, there was no comparison to starvation that was in Vision. The rats in that camp were as big as cats. They were like big possums, and they were not afraid of us. They were standing there. They were at my. There were not bunk beds, but there were shelves. We were sleeping on three-tier shelves, and they're just on wood, with whatever covers that we had brought from our first camp. And they were nibbling on people's feet. My sister had found a stick, and she had the stick next to her, and she kept on banging, but it didn't move. They were nibbling on her toe, but she kept on banging. She almost hit one, and they finally walked away like little possums. And then one night, there was one girl that cried out, screaming, and one of the rats caught on her lip. And we were watched by Ukrainians. The Ukrainians were all around the camp, because Vision was called a concentration camp. This is where the concentration camps began. And so some people over there were like, they were men, were electricians, and they had more privileges, and they were allowed to come to the barracks, to the women's barracks, or outside the women's barracks, because the men's barracks were separated from the women's barracks by barbed wire. And so some of the men who were electricians or had other skills that were allowed to be at the women's barracks, they were doing some black market by, if anybody had some clothing or something to sell, they would sell it to the Polish people across the wires.